If you like this video, please consider supporting me on Patreon. For just $1 a month, your name can appear at the beginning of this and many other upcoming videos.
Okay, just starting us off in the middle of things. I guess a lot of stories do that. Let's see what it adds.
You must be the very worst wolf I've ever seen.
A weak-ass fake-out we all saw coming. Anything else?
Wolves don't hide in trees.
I just picked the wrong tree.
It was a dead tree.
I'm gonna take this talk about trees as no, there is nothing else. So why do we have this generic intro? The opening to both the book and the animated film are simple, straightforward, and reveal a lot of character. Within the first few moments, we know Mowgli is an abandoned baby, a predator has the chance to kill him but doesn't, creates a connection showing love and care, and shows clearly that this is unusual and even risky, yet they still take that chance on this connection. But hell with that nonsense, we have the opening to U.S. Marshals! Yeah, remember that sequel to The Fugitive you don't remember? They start off with a bland action sequence with the main character that doesn't tie into the rest of the movie.
Doesn't tie into the rest of the movie? This opening chase is meant to show how the animals have been pushing Mowgli to be more of a wolf than a man, which he needed to be in order to survive out in the jungle for this long. This chase also contributes to one of the main elements of the final battle, where Mowgli shows how he gained experience and knowledge of recognizing the right trees to use, so he doesn't jump on or climb onto a weak branch which would have killed him. Lastly, it's mirrored during the epilogue, which is meant to show how much Mowgli has grown through the events of the film. It might seem insignificant at face value, but after you take more time to think about it, you realize that it makes 3 major contributions to the development of the plot. Comparing this opening chase scene to the openings of the animated versions doesn't work because it still makes sense in its own self-contained environment. It also just feels unnecessary. The people who made this movie had to have known that there were people who already saw the animated versions. They knew that going through all of this introducing Mowgli into his family and the jungle as his home stuff again would have been redundant because we already got that somewhere else. Perhaps that's not the case if you've never seen the animated versions, but in that case it still wouldn't matter because the live-action remake is still avoiding doing the same thing that the animated ones did. It was basically doing this to avoid origin fatigue.
By the way, see if you can tell which lines are from one of the greatest literary minds who ever lived, and which ones are Disney writers trying to make their 5-year-old laugh.
The law runneth over and back. For the strength of the pack is the wolf, and the strength of the wolf is the pack.
There's a rock. That's my rock. That's my rock. Nobody touches my rock. There's another rock.
The wolf that keeps it may prosper, but the wolf that breaks it will die.
Weird. That's weird.
Pretty hard to tell, right?
This dialogue argument was something I was going to let slide at first, but after giving it some thought, this is also a very exaggerated criticism. And it also feels irritating that he's treating what's actually a nitpick as if it was a major problem with the movie. That part where the mice say weird a few times is meant to show how Mowgli's inventions are out of place in the jungle, and don't belong in the presence of the animals. The argument that Doug seems to make is the shift in the tone of the dialogue, but there's a couple of ways to explain it. Mowgli is speaking the wisdom that he learned from living in the wolf pack. They made his dialogue fitting and true to the setup of his character, so it's not a detriment to how the lines are delivered. And the animals who are completely irrelevant background characters are the ones who say the more lighthearted stuff, which can easily be ignored. He also uses this as an excuse to compare the live-action one to the animated ones again. Now, it's true that the 2 animated versions were wise to keep a consistent tone separate from each other, but Doug is using this to say that the live-action remake doesn't have a consistent tone. The problem with this argument is that the movie does have a tone that stays reasonably consistent, knowing how to time the serious stuff and the lighthearted stuff properly.
A man cub becomes man, and man is forbidden!
This Shere Khan is odd.
The Shere Khan in this version still fits into the setting. His primal fear of man is still present, and he fears what Mowgli can become if he's allowed to live. Even if Mowgli did go to the village, what would stop him from coming back years later as a hunter? The other animals might know that Mowgli is better than this, but Shere Khan doesn't because of his prejudice. This was also something that was established in the animated Disney version.
What's he got against the kid?
He hates man with a vengeance, you know that. Because he fears man's gun and man's fire.
But little Mowgli don't have those things.
Shere Khan won't wait until he does.
In the original story, he's a screaming, bloodthirsty thug, but still follow the laws of the jungle. In the anime one, he's calm and sophisticated, but does whatever he wants for the thrill of it. Here, they try to combine the two, and it just doesn't add up.
I don't see how this Khan is supposed to be a combination of the two animated ones, since neither of their character traits are very present in him. He doesn't have either of their charisma, and he's far more straightforward with how menacing he is.
He has an elegant vocabulary, but he's always dirty and covered in mud. Imagine if the anime one looked like that. He'd look ridiculous.
You're trying my patience.
The filth and dirt implies how he's a ruthless fighter who enjoys the brutality of his hunts. Again, it fits with this version because he's not trying to be charismatic. He's being straightforward in how ruthless he is.
No matter where you go, or what they may call you, you will always be my son.
Feel free to return to share our incredible moments, like hearing Bagheera talk about our incredible moments.
Mowgli and the wolves do have a strong relationship in this version. It was simple, but it also had enough detail to not be hollow and absent-minded. When Mowgli says he's leaving, there's a more urgent sense of drama. There's a back and forth on him going, and the mother shows emotion towards the decision. You can see that Mowgli and his adopted mother are very close based on how they talk during the opening and how they lock heads during his departure. The same can also be said about his brother Gray. We get to see some of them interacting in the beginning, and we get to see how Mowgli's departure affects him. You don't need a whole bunch of scenes of Mowgli interacting with the wolves because the relationship is conveyed through body language and personal conversation.
Shere Khan separates them, though, as Mowgli tries hiding among the wildebeest stampede.
Those are water buffaloes, not wildebeests. Considering that he got this information wrong to make that Lion King reference, it just makes the joke feel more obvious and flat.
Mowgli gets away, though, which should make Shere Khan happy, seeing how he's finally out of the jungle.
Just because Khan didn't see Mowgli at the end of the stampede doesn't mean that he was out of the jungle. He could still be in it for all he knows. And guess what? He was right. Mowgli did spend the rest of the majority of the movie in the jungle.
Now, this might sound like a dumb question at first, but really think about it. Like, actually think it over. Why does Shere Khan want Mowgli?
Because of his primal fear of man, which is something that you should have picked up by now. Even if he's not as interesting as the animated counterparts, they still got that aspect of his character right. Khan didn't want to risk Mowgli growing stronger and becoming more of a tactician in a potential fight against him. And we see how he's capable of building sharp-ended weapons that he could use to fight off Khan. He obviously can't do anything against a whole village of people who have gathered to build firm structure and weapons that can easily overwhelm him, but when he hears of a single one being in his domain, he's compelled to destroy it.
In the anime one is for the thrill of the hunt. He loves the challenge and smiles whenever he even hears the mention of man.
The animated Disney one didn't hunt Mowgli just for the thrill of the chase. He too hated man with a vengeance. If he only did it for the thrill of the hunt, it would have made him look like a psychotic serial killer. And that clearly wasn't the way that his character was being established.
If he can do whatever he wants, like in the anime one, why didn't he just get Mowgli at the watering hole?
Because he can't just do whatever he wants. The whole Day of Peace thing was clearly spelled out for you. He had to respect the law of the water truce, a time when hunting was forbidden. This is what enrages Khan further because Mowgli is being protected by a truce he can't do anything about. It also upsets him that the man being forbidden rule was being excused for Mowgli's sake. And despite that, he still chose to not attack Mowgli at the watering hole while the truce was active. He waited until the rain season came, in which Peace Rock would be covered and the truce would have ended. He didn't kill Mowgli or Akela or anyone else at the Peace Rock because he knew that it was forbidden to fight there. This is meant to show that Khan, in his own fucked up way, cares about the laws of the jungle to an extent.
If he follows the rules like in the book, he just threw those out the window when he killed the wolf's leader.
Again, Khan didn't violate the rules of the jungle when he killed Akela. He respected the law during the watering truce when hunting was forbidden. There was no truce going on at the time that he attacked him. The rain season had come and the Peace Rock was covered.
And it doesn't matter because Mowgli's out of the jungle anyway, there's no threat.
He was clearly still in the jungle as I just went over. That's why he felt compelled to draw him out.
Either way, there's no reason for him to want this damn kid, not in character motivation or logical survival.
The way I see it, Khan thinks of Mowgli as a threat because he obtained more intricate knowledge on the jungle, and he fears that he can use that knowledge to damage the jungle later on, which makes him potentially more dangerous than any other man. In a later scene, King Louie assumed that the ability to create the red flower is something that man is just born with. Shere Khan and many of the other animals could believe the same thing, so Khan would probably think that Mowgli will make a red flower and try to destroy the jungle when he gets older.
I know they're trying to be the grown-up version.
So now comes the most repetitive argument that Doug makes in this review, because trust me, you're gonna be hearing it a couple of more times, calling the live-action remake the grown-up version. I know I'm only speaking for myself here, but I never saw anyone calling the 2016 remake the grown-up version, especially considering how the movie is rated PG. It might be darker than the animated one, but that doesn't make it an adult version. And if you think it's because of the trailers, those don't count. The trailers were made to make the film look epic, not mature. I'd say that the Chuck Jones short was a lot more adult than the live-action remake, but that's not what the live-action remake was trying to be. It was trying to be a family movie in which both adults and children can enjoy it. Because of how the movie mixes more serious stuff with a lighthearted and upbeat tone, it's capable of translating its themes to any audience member of any age. Seeing Doug constantly throwing that reputation in its face when it never had it in the first place is obnoxious. And using that mocking voice and those finger movements to mock the movie's positive reception makes it feel a little bit more tedious.
But when the adult version can't answer why and the kid version can, you're pretty much becoming DC.
Dawn of Justice didn't suck because it was the grown-up alternative to the cartoon. It sucked because it was a poorly executed mess of 20 different stories meshed together with a faulty premise. Comparing it to this movie for the singular purpose of boosting your ego is a petty low blow.
She, for no reason I can figure, tells him that Shere Khan killed his father, then tries to eat him but is knocked out by Baloo the bear. And that's it, no more Ka. Under 2 minutes of no jokes, no songs, not even really any character.
Ka was doing more than just explaining Mowgli's backstory. She was foreshadowing the presence of the red flower, which plays a key role during the climax. It's described as a destructive, mysterious force that the animals of the jungle don't understand. It's why they're afraid of fire, and it's one of the reasons why man is supposed to be forbidden. This is a crucial plot point that Doug completely overlooks, despite that it was meant to explain to the audience about one of the reasons why Khan is afraid of Mowgli and why he would want to kill him. So despite not having as much character as the animated one, she still added something to the film.
So, which one is really better? The silly little kid version that no one remembers, or the super complex, dark and gritty grown-up version? What the hell are you people?
Alright, if Doug is gonna keep bringing this up, then I suppose I should say something about it too. The idea of something being darker, edgier, and more serious. Here's how I understand it to work. In order for the darker and more serious stuff to not come across as overbearing and annoying, there needs to be a form of compromise. If you make something dark and edgy for the sake of being dark and edgy, of course it's going to be bad. However, if you can find a way for it to have purpose and meaning in the story that you're telling while not pushing it too much, you can end up pulling off something interesting. For example, Batman the Animated Series could have been incredibly awful. It could have been a cartoon that was being dark and edgy and serious for the singular purpose of appeasing to an older audience. But the writing came across as balanced and relatable. And it wasn't just dark and edgy. It was also silly, goofy, straightforward, adventurous, charming, all mixed with a sense of humanity. These were things that both adults and children could relate to, which would explain why many adults who grew up in the 90s still find Batman the Animated Series as a fantastic show. And that's what the live-action remake of The Jungle Book is. It too was darker and more serious, but it was also silly, goofy, straightforward, adventurous, and charming. The way that Doug constantly mocks it by calling it the adult version or the grown-up version quickly becomes a straw man argument. It feels like an ongoing argument in the YouTube comment section, and he's really reaching out to things to complain about in order to prove his faulty points.
I have to go to the man village.
So Mowgli decides to head to the man village. Yeah, I guess he's okay with going there again.
When Mowgli says he has to go to the village, he says it with a tone that shows how he feels like it's being forced on him. Bagheera was constantly telling him that he needed to go despite that he didn't want to.
You can always tell by the red flower.
The red flower doesn't seem so bad.
Yeah, let it loose and it destroys everything it touches.
Kinda weird how he calls fire the red flower, but a moment earlier he used the word propaganda.
He calls it the red flower because he, like every other animal, doesn't know anything about it. All he knows is how it's a destructive force that spreads fast. He's more familiar with the wolves because he lives in the same space as them, and their lifestyle strongly contrasts with his own. That's why he jokingly refers to their speech as propaganda. And furthermore, why would you expect any of the animals to refer to fire as fire in this version? It's made very clear that no one in the jungle knows the actual term. The idea of fire being a mysterious force to the inhabitants of the jungle is captured during Mowgli sneaking into the village near the climax. We see it from his point of view as this vibrant red aura that looks majestic and beautiful, but can also be destructive if handled poorly.
He even finds an elephant trapped in a hole and uses his ingenuity to get him out. It's actually a very nice scene. But it's botched when Bagheera finds them both and tries to take Mowgli back to the man village.
The meaning behind the scene doesn't get botched. Bagheera in his heart acknowledges that a part of Mowgli should stay in the jungle. It's just that with Khan on the loose, he has to be taken somewhere else because it's the only way to ensure that he doesn't end up getting killed.
Do I have to spell this out? I don't want you around anymore.
Okay, look, this scene in the anime one is kinda lame too, because Mowgli's just being a brat. But Baloo still tells him the truth.
But telling Mowgli the truth wouldn't have changed anything, or make him stay away from Khan for that matter. Bagheera tried changing Mowgli's mind earlier, and that didn't work either. Mowgli still wanted to stay in the jungle even with Bagheera warning him about Khan. If Baloo told Mowgli that he should just live in the village, he would argue and stubbornly stay anyway. Also, if he does tell the truth and tell Mowgli that his wolf father was killed, it would make Mowgli go back to Khan in revenge, which would end up doing exactly what Khan wants. It might result in the cliché rift for the third act, but it still makes sense in the context of the situation. Driving him away was the only reasonable thing he could think of to make Mowgli think of going to the village.
In this version, Baloo convinces him to stay in the jungle. Mowgli was actually gonna go to the man village even without Bagheera.
There was no guarantee that Mowgli was gonna go to the village because of how much more fun he was having living with Baloo. He specifically said that he didn't want to leave because he felt better living there. This is something that he says after that pep talk by the village. You also need to consider Mowgli's main motivation. He wanted to leave the wolf pack because he thought it would keep them safe from Khan. Mowgli never wanted to go to the man village at all. He always saw going to the village as a minor alternative to going somewhere else. There's a scene earlier on where he suggests living with a different herd of animals where he thinks he can hide from Khan. Once Mowgli feels he can just live with Baloo, an alternative is presented to him and he would no longer feel a desire to go to the man village.
The book didn't need him lying, the anime one didn't need him lying, but this one does because it's the grown-up version.
Good God, man, do we really need to go into the whole grown-up thing again?
How did it get this again?
Okay, anyone with half a brain can tell at this point that Rotten Tomatoes is a horrible, irrelevant website, and shame on you for using it as a reliable source of information, twice.
But before getting him out, Louis reveals that the leader of the wolves is dead.
Shere Khan killed him.
Again, Bagheera could have relayed that information.
Had Bagheera relayed that information to Mowgli, it would have made him run recklessly to his death. Which, guess what, is exactly what ends up happening. Bagheera was put in charge of looking after Mowgli specifically to not let that happen.
But we have to pretend this pointless scene wasn't a pointless scene because, again, grown-up version.
Come on, man, it's not even funny anymore. Did you seriously just assume that because it's a live-action remake?
Finding this out, Mowgli sneaks into the man village to grab the red flower to fight off Shere Khan. A few drops of it fall and I can see where the phrase spread like wildfire comes from because shit! The whole jungle's on fire in seconds! Okay, this would literally have to go from this to this in a matter of a few minutes. Even wildfire doesn't spread like wildfire!
Yeah, I watched Bambi a while back and the fire in that movie spread pretty fast too. This would be okay as a nitpick, but he's treating it like a plot hole considering that he brings it up a few more times during the climax. Wildfire can actually spread pretty damn fast, and if he doesn't believe that, he's clearly never heard of Arizona.
So the animals are now afraid of Mowgli for starting the fire, even his family, but he throws out the fire, which is the stupidest thing he could have done.
That was the stupidest thing you could have done.
Right? If you destroyed their home, you might as well use it for its original intent.
Mowgli was proving to Khan and all of the other animals that he wasn't the kind of man that he was afraid of. Sure, he gets the fire at the beginning, but that's after he found out that his family was in danger. He was desperate and needed something he thought he could use to protect them from Khan. That was just the pressuring situation he was placed in, especially since he was left more angry by Baloo and Bagheera not being honest with him. When Mowgli was given the chance to use the fire to hurt Khan instead of protect his wolf pack, he gets rid of it.
But the animals stand behind Mowgli to say, thanks for burning everything down, and why the hell didn't we rise up to fight this jackass days earlier?
The wolves weren't strong enough to take on Khan by themselves, something that was actually shown during the final battle.
In just about every version, he goes back to the man village because they build up, that's where he belongs. But this one doesn't do that. Why? No goddamn clue!
I do prefer the ending of the animated versions, but I can actually see what they were going for here. They wanted to give the ending a more modern take, and things that happen in this version actually support that take. It's an allegory for nurture over nature. The Jungle Book at its core is still about a human boy who was raised and loved by animals, and the bond between him and the wolves is made out to be stronger than in the animated Disney one. Instead of the message being you have to be with your own kind, it was turned into live where you feel like you belong. So it's not really a surprise that this movie would take a different direction and stay true to what it was doing.
Guys, I don't get this.
Considering your history with Disney movies, I never expected you to.
The original story is aggressive, dark, and full of great tropes. The animated film is cute, charming, and full of unforgettable characters. This tries to combine them without realizing what made them work on their own.
Or maybe it was doing its own spin on the story. The new ending they went with kind of implements that. Just because it was acknowledging things that happened in the animated versions doesn't mean it was trying to be a combination of the two.
Are you gonna remember any of these characters more than the animated one? Probably not. Are you gonna remember the language or lessons as much as the book? Whether it's a delightful little kids movie you'll return to more and more, or an epic coming-of-age story you'll return to more and more, this one will most likely be looked at less and less.
Didn't you say in your It review that even though the new one was better, the original was more memorable because of its familiar feel? Of course people will remember the animated one more because it's just the version that they grew up with. Why does that automatically make the remake badly written? You literally said the animated Disney one is more memorable than the live-action one, meaning that the live-action one must be bad as a result. But that shouldn't be used as a definitive reason as to why. You are literally going back on a lesson you taught your audience in the past for the sake of your own self-entitled outlook on this movie. It feels like Doug is deliberately contradicting himself just to get his thoughts on this movie across. It's incredibly contradictory, and combined with all of the other fundamental problems with this review, it results in a complete mess of an analysis.
I want Disney to do an authentic version of this book. I want it so authentic that the author's name is above the title.
The Jungle Book.
Not directed by the idiot who directed the Mummy movie.
But it's in live action, Doug. That must mean it's the real grown-up You know what? Fuck this show.
I will have you all in my teeth!
Oh man, this is really living.